everyone, this is Dawn with the Twice-Sheared Sheep, and welcome to Technique Thursday. Last week we carded our rollags of alpaca that we had dyed. This week we are going to spin that into yarn. Now I had said that we were going to do a long draw spinning, but I decided that actually my favorite for these puffy alpaca rollags is to spin a frosted yarn. Now a frosted yarn is a core spun yarn, but I call it a frosted yarn because it is a very lightweight core, or very lightweight frosting around the core. A lot of core spun yarns can be really dense and really firm, and the goal of this yarn is to just kiss the outside of the core so that it looks like there's a cloud just hovering over it. So today what we're going to need is we're going to need a core yarn. This is my core today. It is a wool, merino wool recycled yarn. You want something that is strong and that has the characteristics that you'd like in your final yarn. That this is going to provide all of the support for your yarn and provide the structure of your yarn. So you want to make sure that this is a yarn that you like. If you use a cotton core, your yarn is going to behave very much like cotton. It won't have any stretch and it will be very firm and strong. But you do want a strong core. And then we're going to need a fluffy batt or rollag, or many of them actually, for your frosting. Now the reason why I like a frosted yarn or a core spun yarn is because it uses very little fiber for the amount of yarn that you get. It creates a really fluffy, soft yarn, and you get to see all of it. If you've ever gotten a batt or a painted roving that you absolutely loved, particularly an art batt that has some really interesting things in it, and then when you spin it you realize that half of that fiber content is buried on the inside of the yarn and you can't even see it. So a core spun or a frosted yarn wraps that around the outside of the core so you can see every bit of that sparkle, every bit of color. And if you have a really precious, expensive fiber like cashmere or alpaca or Angora rabbit or something like that, that you spent a lot of money on this and you want to get a lot of yarn out of it, then this is the way to do it, because it doesn't take much fiber to create a lot of yarn, because all you're really doing is decorating the outside of it. And so a core spun yarn or a frosted yarn looks like a singles yarn, which is another reason to do it this way, is that if you want the look of a singles yarn, but you want the durability that you can't get in a singles yarn, then a core spun yarn or a frosted yarn is the way to go, because the inside, the core, is already nice and strong, and so you don't have to worry about how tightly you twist the outside. The outside can be really fluffy and beautiful and still be a strong yarn. Now something to consider when you're making a core spun yarn. It looks like a singles yarn, but if you've ever tried to work with a singles yarn, you know that it is not a balanced yarn. There's no way that it can be, because any hand spun yarn follows the rule of two. That in order for it to be balanced, it needs to go through the wheel 2 times. The standard 2 yarn would be a 2-ply yarn, or even a 3-ply yarn or a 5-ply yarn has gone through the wheel twice. The first time for when you spun the singles, and the second time for when you plied it. And the reason why it works is because the first time that it goes through, it went one direction, and the second time it went through, you go the other direction, and it helps untwist some of that over twist to make a balanced, non-energized yarn. Now if you want an energized yarn, you want to work and have your knitting skew because that's what you're looking for, then by all means make a singles. But we're trying to make a balanced yarn that looks like a singles. So in order to do that, we're going to have to make our yarn happy by following the rule of 2. So in order to do that, we need to first send our binder, or send our core through the wheel. That'll be the first time. So the core will go through the wheel and we're going to make it go to the left. For you that's probably this way. But we're going to make it go to the left. We're going to spin it to the left and just run your core through. And then the second time for our rule of 2 is we're going to frost the outside with our fiber. So essentially you're almost making a 2-ply yarn that looks like a single ply. So let's sit down at the wheel and we'll give it a go. So our core yarn for today is a brown merino recycled yarn. It's about worsted weight, maybe DK, and this is going to make up the bulk of our yarn. This will be the center. It doesn't have a lot of elasticity, but it's very strong, which is what we need in a core yarn, because of course the outside is not going to have much strength in and of itself. And so we're just going to put this through our leader, and we're going to run it through the wheel, spinning to the left. And we're just pretty much going to run it as fast as we can, just straight through. We're not worrying about how tight it is or anything. This is a great thing to do, to just treadle as you're watching TV or listening to music. Or I've even sat my e-reader right here on my knee and read while I just ran it through. So really, I kind of feel as it comes down, and that's all there is to it. Watching as it's filling up your bobbin, you're going to want to move it along. But when you've got some time, just fill up an entire bobbin full of core yarn, and you can use this for several projects if you've got a large bobbin. Okay, so we've got our core already pre-spun in a little ball now. We're going to put that through our leader and we're going to get it started, and we're going to the right this time to spin our alpaca on here. So we're going to frost our core now with our alpaca. The key to really getting a good frost is that you want it nice and wide and very thin layer right here as it's coming off your rolag or your batt. That the frosting, this is a very lightweight core spun. This is not a compact or a dense core spun. The goal of this is to make it look like there's like a cloud of alpaca surrounding your core. It's okay if you see your core a little bit through your alpaca. So choose your core that it will still look nice with the color that you've got here. So essentially we're just going to hold the tip of it there until it catches. We're going to pull with our thumb and our forefinger and let it roll onto the core, like so. It's okay if you end up with areas like this that are a little bit puffier and areas that are a little bit thinner. I think that adds to the character of the yarn. That really you want your angle almost horizontal to your core as you're putting it in. And as I'm going, I'm just letting the core slide through my hands. So I'll take a pinch, I'll let it wrap on, and let it slide through my hands and go onto the bobbin. It's almost like we're spinning a cloud over the top of another yarn. And you can spin it tight, real compact down, or you can spin it really lofty and let it be a cloud on top of it. It's all up to what you want to do with your yarn. I believe very strongly in intentional yarn though, so think about what you want your yarn to look like and what you want to do with it, and then create it that way. And you would just continue this way until you have used up all of your precious fiber or you have run out of space on your bobbin. If you're spinning a really lofty yarn, you want to make sure that you take the time to move it along on your bobbin. And it's also important to think about that I'm using the largest whirl that I can get. This is a bulky whirl because I'm spinning essentially a bulky yarn. And I want it to be relaxed. So you'll notice that it's got a little bit of a kink to it right now. And that's okay because it hasn't been through the wash yet. But you want it to be fairly relaxed. You don't want it like this where it's all going to kink up in a tiny little snarl. That this is going to, when I wash it, be a fairly balanced yarn. So you can see right here I've got a little bit of my core showing through. That's okay. Frosting a yarn is a very relaxing process and allows you to really get to pet your fibers. So, go ahead and grab your favorite luxury fiber in your collection and give this a whirl. We will see you next week for Technique Thursdays. Have a great week. Bye-bye.